was my confetti rice. I had some chicken thighs grilled, and then a side of beans, and then a dessert that came out of the course as well. I think it was a rice pudding. And when they got done, I said, how was the food? They loved it. People were getting seconds. And we fed everyone for like $3.17 each. So these are strategies that are really valuable.
Yeah, and I like the thought that it's not prison gruel, because unless you've bought a lot of foods to store up, to get prepped out, the most idea of people of living it through some sort of prolonged grid down or prolonged supply chain disruption is MREs 3 times a day, and they can't get out of that vision of they're going to eat the same thing 3 meals a day. Why would you have ever consider doing that when you have so much abundance around? And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Special guest, Kevin Snow. A lot of the things I talk about, crop losses here, economic reductions over there, but today it's going to be more about what we can do about it. So we're going to talk about harvest eating, and Chef Keith Snow has the Harvest Eating YouTube channel. Also, if you go back and look at some of the prior videos there, had the television series of Harvest Eating, and then also right over on harvesteating.com. Today's talk is going to be all about how to store foods for a longer amount of time, because right now things are bountiful in the harvest. If you go to farmers co-ops, you're going to find every bin's full. Bulk buying, I buy from the Amish down the road. They had 15 pounds of green beans for $15, but that's in a bulk. So wherever you go right now is the best time to buy foods. And then think about the seasonality of the foods. It's going to switch over to fruits later on, from the present fruits that we have with apricots and different types of summer berries, which we need to store those up. But then we're going to switch over to the apples, the pumpkins, and you can get that full year round. So probably, I'm going to say 6 months of the year, you don't have access to, very fresh foods. So you're going to have to store that. And I am trying to learn the best I can here. I'm happy Keith is joining me because I am here to learn. And I'm really hoping that today's talk is going to give you some very solid information that you can share with your friends, your families, help you save money, help you have a healthier, diet moving through. I know canned foods have a lot of sodium, and I store food as well, but I like to mix fresh in when I have a chance. And this is what it's all about today. Storing the foods, being able to take what you have in different ways, fashions, and forms. We want to be able to store our own, grow our own, trade our own with others. So Keith, welcome. Floor is yours.
So we talk about all the foods that you can store and how you can mix things that you can get now, because we're not in a crisis now. Like you said earlier, there's still a lot of food in the market, but I think it does make sense for the average family, instead of having that typical, meat and 3, which about being down there in the South, a big plate of meat with a couple of vegetables. Why not have rice and beans and chicken? Or why not make your own cornbread? One of the great recipes, something called kettle cornbread. And I grind my own corn. It's organic, dried corn. I put it through the mill, and then I grind some whole wheat flour, but I also add butter and raw dairy to it and a little bit of salt to it. And I make this, it's hard to call it a bread. It's almost like a cake. It is delicious. So it's a kettle corn bread or cake. And the kids and my kids' friends, every time they come over, the first thing, do you have any of that cornbread? So this isn't prison gruel. This is stuff that you want to eat. We have Asian dishes in there. We've got game dishes. So a lot of hunters up in Montana. We've got dishes that feature elk and deer meat, lots of soups, all different types of rice dishes, scones made out of oats, all different types of foods and dishes in there. So it's kind of a crash course of using common ingredients with, dried ingredients, all the grains, the flours, the rices, the beans, both canned and fresh, tuna fish, you name it. And then you mix it with fresh ingredients that I hope you guys are finding sources of, and you make really great meals that are nutritious, that are exciting. So those are ways to add flavor, and you've traveled around the world, some of these other cultures, I mean, if you compare the average American palate, particularly the Southern palate, it can be very heavy and sort of one-sided. You know, a lot of fried foods, a lot of, you know, neutral flavored things, just kind of, you know, roasted pork all the time. That could be a little boring, but when you start to add in other aromatic vegetables, herbs, spices, it takes average food and makes it exciting. So the things that I have done in the course, I regularly use them. I make these dishes all the time at my house. They were tested on kids. So people ask, well, will my kids eat it? My kids eat it, and they're used to really fine foods, and they'll eat these things and they love them. My son, I mean, I've got to tell him, no, I'm not making you rice and beans again. You need to eat, you know, this or that. The recipes can be downloaded as PDFs. So we try to make the information, you know, easily accessible in case there was a time when you couldn't get on the internet. We're also going to be turning it into a book. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a cookbook author. It's called the Harvest Eating Cookbook. It is available on Amazon. So we're going to turn the Food Storage Feast into some kind of a book that anybody that joins the course will get a copy of when it's done. It's been in the works a long time, but it's something that I want to do. But overall, I just think it is a very good education. We also show freeze-dried and dehydrated foods in there. It's not solely that. There's one section on freeze-dried foods, probably has 15 or 20 videos, you know, beef, the vegetables, dried carrots, onions, all those things, bell peppers, tomato powder. We show how to make lots of different foods with those, split peas, bean soups, all of that. That's important too. But I try not to use that stuff when I don't have to. So it's something that I think, you know, going into what we're going into, particularly with the food inflation, this is where I'm very sensitive. I have 3 kids. You know, we have an above average income, so we're not super worried about groceries. But I know a lot of families that have lots and lots of kids, and it can be expensive. And, you know, I was at the store the other day. The little lousy steak was like $18. This thing was, I mean, 1/4 inch thick, wasn't grass fed, wasn't good at all. I'm seeing the prices of food and dairy really go up. And I love to, like at the end of the meal, the other day it's 5 of us in my family, and they had 2 friends over. So there were 7 people. And I made this dish for them. I think it was my confetti rice. I had some chicken thighs grilled, and then a side of beans, and then a dessert that came out of the course as well. I think it was a rice pudding. And when they got done, I said, how was the food? They loved it. People were getting seconds. And we fed everyone for like $3.17 each. So these are strategies that are really valuable.
Yeah, I like the thought that it's not prison gruel, because and unless you've bought a lot of foods to store up, to get prepped out, most idea of people of living it through some sort of prolonged grid down or prolonged supply chain disruption is MREs 3 times a day, and they can't get out of that vision of they're going to eat the same thing 3 meals a day. Why would you have ever consider doing that when you have so much abundance around? If you're prepared, so you could have pancakes in the morning, you know, you could have eggs or powdered milk or whatever. Even if you got access to the dairies and access to, the further you are in the farm country, the better you are, because you're stuck in the city, you're going for powdered milk. You're out here in the countryside, you're going down to your local neighbor who does have a dairy farm and getting real milk from the cow. It's all relative. So where's your location at? Are you in a city? Are you in the suburb? Are you out in the rural area? Are you way out in farm country? Because you could be in a rural area. I mean, you could be in the middle of like a pine forest somewhere, you know, in Montana. No, we're not even remotely close to any farms, but you're still super rural. And depending if you're rural and in farmland. So there's a whole bunch of variables to think about, but prison gruel is not on my menu in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, and it's not on mine either. And, you know, we're a family that loves soup, for instance. And I grew up, my mom is Italian. She actually recently passed. She was 93, almost 94. And she definitely quoted and said her longevity was because she ate soup every day. And soup is, you know, just one great example of, and you can combine fresh ingredients with pantry staples like I recommend in the course and make giant pots of soup that are filled with nutrition, fiber, vegetables, meats, healthy bone broths. these are things that it's a great skill to have. And we make a large pot of soup, and I'll make a white bean soup, for instance. I'll use heirloom beans. Sometimes I'll use freeze-dried onions in there, but celery, carrot, onions, herbs from the garden. I'll go and put a bunch of kale into it. Old bread, I'll chop it up and make breadcrumbs. I mean, not breadcrumbs, but bread cubes that are toasted with garlic and olive oil. I'll put those in there. Parmesan cheese, all kinds of things that make these bowls of soup that it's a meal. You don't have anything else. Maybe you have dessert afterwards, but we serve this at our house all the time. And a big giant pot of soup like that, it can be made for, I don't know, $8, $10 maybe. And you can serve 5 people 3 times with it. And you're not suffering, you're enjoying it. I mean, it's gourmet food, it's delicious. All kinds of texture, little diced tomatoes, onions, garlic. These are simple strategies to get into. And, you mentioned where you are in the country. At one point, I was living on a farm, and my neighbor had 150 acres. He had a great big house, loads of cattle, all the room in the world. And we were out in the country, 6 miles out in the country. The wife would put the kids in the car in the morning, drive into town, and buy them Bojangles for breakfast. They'd come back and they'd sit there and eat Bojangles. And I mean, I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't understand this. And you go into their pantry. These are very, very well-educated, well-off people. Nothing. An old thing of cornmeal, some ice pops in the freezer, maybe a, Swanson's breakfast sausage, just no food. And you can't, if you're in that kind of mindset where you're constantly running to the store, running to fast food, you're not going to be healthy. You're wasting a lot of money. There's no enjoyment in eating that stuff. I mean, I tried one time. I was at some kind of a church event, and they had Bojangles biscuits. I don't know what was on it. I took one bite of that thing. It was scary. I mean, I can't eat that kind of food, and I don't think anybody should. So learning how to make these kind of dishes and these old school soups and stews, they feed a lot of people. It stretches your budget, and it's real food. So very important.
Yeah, gourmet food and a grid down. And again, if you had cornmeal and you have yeast and you have a large container, you can ferment that. And if you have a still, you can make your own alcohol. Just saying. We are in the South down here with the moonshine,
No, I know.
Just throwing it out.
Trust me, I've had some videographers that were Southern boys, and we would film Harvest Eating TV shows, and these guys would pull out little mason jars of this clear liquid for me.
Quart jars, yeah.
Yeah, serious stuff.
And I hope you did get a bunch of useful information, because we could have talked about all the nasty things going on, but you can get enough of that. You can get a basket full and then some by just going to your favorite news channel. So we thought we'd keep it on a light note today, try to give incredible value to help you and your families get prepared through these changes that are not coming anymore. Forget the coming, they're here now. It's manifesting now. It's going through the motion now. There's no more it's here. If you haven't seen that yet, I'm sorry, you're not looking, or you're cognitively putting that to the side there, like I don't want to deal with it. One of those two, but the changes are here. Dealing with it is another thing. You can, face it head on, grab the bull by the horns, get excited about the lifestyle changes that are upon us, knowing that you might have more freedom in many different ways in terms of your food sovereignty and being able to live in a little bit healthier, more in balance with your natural surroundings, because these changes are coming. Like the old lifestyle, we're not going back there. So the changes that are here, you can embrace them. You can fear them. You can cower from them and try to take your mind back to the old world, which will not exist again in our lifetimes, nor for, the rest of many more generations in the future. So it's all how you perceive the moments now moving forward, and to be able to put your fingers in the earth and grow your own food and take that same food and then be able to put it into your stomach within hours or minutes or, a short amount of time after you pick it or cure it. Something very different in that, something incredibly fulfilling that you can't get by going to a supermarket and buying it. Boy, it's just opening a can. It's so remotely different. It's just being on a trampoline or getting into a space shuttle and launching. It's about the equivalent difference of something like that.
I just wanted to say that I've been following your work for a long time. I'm not somebody that will quote somebody else without looking back and seeing, and I've watched a lot of things that you've talked about for going on 5 years now, and your research and the things that you've talked about, they are coming true. I've spoken with the farmers. The weather things are spot on. And I just wanted to mention, you talk about being self-sufficient. So back in January of 2020, I was reading international headlines about the virus and seeing lockdowns and shutdowns. And I remember telling people that I work with that this is coming here, and they laughed at me. But 6 weeks later, we shut down a resort that I was running as the food and beverage director. It was closed for quite a long time. So these things can happen. When we were locked down, we didn't need to go to the store. We didn't need to panic about toilet paper. I was like, this, being prepared and having a deep pantry, this works, because we had all the things, not just food. We had all the toiletries that we put away, but we were eating great meals at home. Yeah, I dug into some of our long-term stuff, but we had amazing meals, pasta dishes, breads, desserts, all kinds of food. We went into the freezer and had grass-fed meat in there. So this is really helpful stuff. And, I was patting myself on the back because I never really needed to use it, so to speak, before. I mean, I definitely recommend rotating through stored foods. But when we were locked down in 2020, we were home over a month, and we were cooking a lot of food because going to the supermarket was a major pain in the neck. So we really got to put it into use, and I really appreciate you giving me the time, and it's been interesting to get to know you, and I think we're on similar paths. So I wish you well with all your preparations and the channel, and if anybody needs to contact me, just go to harvesteating.com or the instagram.com/harvesteating. And I can be reached at keithsnow@gmail.com. So I'm out there and willing to help where I can. So thanks a lot, David.
And before we sign off here, harvesteating.com, there's an enormous amount of free resources on there. I was just, going back to the site while you're finishing up, because I was looking at the recipes while you were talking. And what do you have? Like 12, 15 recipes right there on one of the drop-down menus that people can click on and jump in, and it links back to the video so you can watch how it's done. I mean, beyond anything else, the amount of free resources to get you started to fingers in on food storage, food preps, and then being able to cook something that is tasty, that's made from all the storable foods right here, harvesteating.com. So, excuse me, I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that there's a huge gamut of information on there. And the only reason I'll finish with this thought, the only reason I know and could say with some certainty about how these changes were going to unfold, I just followed the cycles. In previous grand solar minimums, they did quite good reconstructions over the last 50 or 60 years of where it got cold. And once you started to see the same events started to happen in the same exact places again, with the same exact circumstance where the sun is going into a prolonged period of low solar activity for the next 2 solar cycles, it's just cycles, literally cycles. And once you find the cycle pattern, and you can give it maybe a soft start date somewhere, then you would look for the periphery information of, okay, the outliers where it would start to snow and rain in Morocco along the east coast and the west coast of Morocco on the Atlantic side. And sure enough, these things started to ping off. Algeria got an enormous amount of rainfall. So when I started to research, like, well, maybe Algerian crops will increase if they're getting more rainfall. And then, you start to follow all these crop yields from Tunisia, and all these areas had record grain harvest for the last 3 years. And you start to see deserts greening, and you just follow the patterns. And once you get the patterns set, then you can say, well, if it intensified at this quickness, then we should look for losses along these bands, because they've mapped this out for the last at least very solid 3 cycles, possibly if you want to consider the late antique little ice age with that information, approximately 535 AD, about the volcanic eruptions and the sulfur dioxide drifting, and then the ash particulates across the Mediterranean area that really collapsed. That was the nail in the coffin for the Roman Empire, knowing that food shortages were then as well. So if you start to look and you find some of these same areas, some of the same volcanoes, some of the same cold and record cold, or increasing or decreasing precipitation along these areas, when you can get massive charts for all this stuff going back 3, 4, 5,000 years, I like to get on the 2,500-year chart. This whole climate debate on the last 50 years of climate, or even our last 120, does nobody any good, because you're dismissing the last 3,000 years of climate data where the cycles are really repeatable, and you can start to just, it's this simple. If you got a 3,000-year chart, you can just circle the high points or the low points, whatever it is for moisture, drought, or temperature, or whatever it is. And then you'll start to see the pattern, and then you just map them up. And if you use a logarithmic scale, you can see the time duration between the high points or low points. And then you go, wait a second. Now, wait a second. No, wait. Whoa, whoa. Great resets here. Cryptocurrencies here. And we're spinning into another one of these low solar activities that's going to reset everything anyway. So let me see. What's going to be the most important thing during this time? Your ability to grow food, your ability to trade food, and your safety. And then you start to see these repeating patterns and cycles in history, but now it's pretty much in earnest now, the beginning point, either last year, or maybe if you would like to slide into the beginning of this year, which I think is a little late, I would put the start date of this grand solar minimum with the effects that are affecting society in earnest at 2019 to 2020. Now, as we start to progress through this, we got about 13 to 14 more years of real tumultuous, like not stable grow seasons. Wherever crops are grown commercially at this moment, they're going to need to be pushed further south. So how do you come up with all these new growing areas? And what kind of, and I'm more into the ancient grains because I know we're going to have to substitute crops. And where could you substitute a crop that has this much moisture and this much heat and this many degree cooling days that'll set a plant seed to start to germinate the following year? And then you start to do the research on this, and then you can kind of get a good forecast of where things might bend, move, and morph to. And then, you said, well, you've been on the money for 5 years. Well, all I do is research about where things moved in the past, where they might move in the future again, and where we sit today. So where would it be in 5 years from now?
Yeah, well,
that's kind of all I'm doing. Food is the most important thing, and food's going to be less and less. That's all I'm going to say it there. I can break it down into one thing. Your food price is going to skyrocket, double, triple, quadruple, like it has through every grand solar minimum. And food availability for 8 billion people is going to be substantially reduced. Then what? And I'll let you come up with your own conclusions of the then what will happen. Factory farm meats aren't going to do it.
Yeah, well, most people, they've got their, like I do, a fancy smartphone and so much technology. I mean, this can't possibly affect us is what they think. But most people are, watching TikTok and not doing the research like you have. So I'm definitely grateful for that, because not a lot of people want to look at graphs and historical growth charts and weather patterns, but it's important information. And I appreciate you mentioning my website. There's hundreds and hundreds of recipes and videos on there. I also do a weekly podcast, Harvest Eating Podcast. It's in iTunes, and that I've had since 2010. And I always talk about a recipe on there. And I've been talking more and more about food storage and growing, and I think it's what I'm solely focused on at this point, is adding food security and helping others to do the same. So, yeah, good stuff, David.
All right, thank you. And I'll leave all the links in the description box below the video so you can follow up on a lot of things we talked about. And I'll even list some of the ancient grains, because I know we ran through, and there's a probably handful of people that hadn't heard of a lot of these different types of grains before. They're not widely grown unless you go to, some African nations, or you go to South America or something. You're not going to find a lot of this stuff. So you're going to have to seek it out. And that's part of the point too. So hopefully this will give you a couple of breadcrumbs. Again, no pun intended. It's where you can start your journey to find your way down through different things in your culinary journey for food storage, and also nutrition during these. Well, it's going to be lean times for some, but if you're prepared, you're going to be well taken care of. So Keith, I appreciate you joining. I learned a lot from you today too. I got a whole list of things that I'll take notes for too, of my action list that is way back in the back of the radar that needs to be front and center.
Yeah, well, we all have that, and I appreciate the time, David.
Okay, bye for now.